Imagine a calm afternoon that suddenly becomes the stage for an unexpected confrontation filled with lessons about love, prejudice, and courage. A devoted mother, a suspicious neighbor, and a phone call that changes everything. This story will make you reflect on the choices we make and the consequences they bring. Stay until the end to discover how a single act can transform lives and challenge everything we think we know about empathy and humanity. You won't want to miss it. It was one of those afternoons where the world seemed to slow down, a rare moment of peace in a life that often felt like a whirlwind. Monique Harris sat on her porch, her 2-year-old son, Ethan, giggling in her lap as they played with his favorite toy truck. The sun bathed their quiet Ohio neighborhood in warm light, and everything felt just right until it didn't. Across the street, behind the sheer curtains of her window, Linda Whitaker watched them with an intensity that could cut glass. Her gaze wasn't one of curiosity or friendliness. It was laced with suspicion, a silent question hanging in the air. What's going on here? Linda's unease wasn't born from anything Monique or Ethan had done. It was something deeper, something she might not even admit to herself, a discomfort with what she saw as an unusual family. A black woman and a white child. To Linda, it didn't fit into her neatly boxed worldview. But isn't that often how prejudice works? It creeps in quietly, disguised as concern or curiosity, until it festers into something uglier. Monique, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing across the street, continued to enjoy her afternoon with Ethan, her laughter ringing out like a melody that clashed with Linda's growing unease. And yet, life has a way of turning calm into chaos when you least expect it. What started as an ordinary day for Monique was about to take a sharp turn, one that would test not just her patience, but also her resolve to protect her family against the world's misplaced judgments. The stage was set for an encounter that would ripple far beyond this quiet street, forcing everyone involved to confront truths they'd rather ignore. And just like that, the peace of the afternoon began to crack under the weight of suspicion. Linda's thoughts churned like a stormy sea as she paced her living room, glancing out the window every few minutes. Something about the scene across the street gnawed at her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it, or maybe she could, but didn't want to admit it. Her mind raced with assumptions. Why is that little boy with her? Are they really mother and son? Instead of seeking clarity or even extending a neighborly hello, Linda let her unease grow into certainty. And certainty, when built on bias, can be a dangerous thing. Fueled by her own discomfort, Linda reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before she dialed 911, her voice trembling with what she convinced herself was genuine concern. "I think there might be a child abduction happening," she told the dispatcher, her words heavy with implication but light on evidence. The operator asked for details, but Linda had none, only her assumptions and the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. It's remarkable how quickly fear can masquerade as vigilance, isn't it? How often do people act on instinct without pausing to question whether their instincts are rooted in truth or prejudice? And so, the wheels were set in motion. A call made out of bias rather than fact would soon disrupt Monique's peaceful afternoon and turn it into something far more troubling. But here's the thing about actions driven by prejudice. They don't just harm their immediate targets. They ripple outward, affecting everyone involved. Linda thought she was protecting Ethan, but in reality, she was about to create a situation that would force everyone, including herself, to confront uncomfortable truths about how we see and judge one another. The sound of car doors slamming shattered the stillness of the afternoon. Monique looked up from where she sat with Ethan, her heart skipping a beat as 2 uniformed officers approached her yard. Their expressions were neutral, but their presence carried an unspoken weight. "Ma'am, can we speak with you for a moment?" one of them asked, his tone polite but firm. Monique's stomach tightened. She had done nothing wrong, Yet here she was, being questioned in her own front yard. Ethan clung to her leg, sensing the shift in her mood. Monique remained calm. She had to. She answered their questions with grace, even as they asked for proof of her relationship with Ethan. Her phone became a lifeline as she scrolled through photos of birthdays and bedtime stories, each image a testament to her love for her son. Still, the humiliation was palpable. Why should she have to prove herself in this way? The officers weren't hostile, but their skepticism was clear. It wasn't just a question of legality. It was a question of belonging. And in that moment, Monique felt the full weight of what it meant to be judged not by who you are, but by what others assume you to be. As the officers finally nodded and stepped back, satisfied that no crime had been committed, Monique exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But the damage was done. The peaceful bubble of her afternoon had been burst by a reality she couldn't escape, that in the eyes of some, her family didn't fit. And while the officers left without incident, their presence lingered like a shadow over her home. Across the street, Linda watched from her window, oblivious to the emotional toll her actions had taken on Monique and Ethan. But Monique wasn't about to let this end here, not without addressing the root of the problem. Monique's steps were steady but deliberate as she crossed the street, her heart pounding with a mix of frustration and determination. She wasn't one to seek out confrontation, but this time she couldn't let it slide. Linda stood on her porch, arms crossed defensively, as Monique approached. "Was it you?" Monique asked, her voice calm but firm. Linda hesitated for a moment before admitting, "I just thought something seemed off. I was only trying to look out for the boy." Her words hung in the air, hollow and unconvincing, like a poorly rehearsed excuse. Monique's gaze didn't waver. "Look out for him," she repeated, her tone sharpening. "You didn't look out for him. You endangered us both. You didn't ask questions. You didn't get to know us. You assumed." Linda shifted uncomfortably but didn't respond. Monique continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "Do you know what it feels like to be judged by how you look? To have your love for your child questioned because someone else can't see past their own biases?" The words hit their mark, and Linda's defensive posture softened ever so slightly. But acknowledgement wasn't enough, not yet. The tension between them was palpable, but so was the truth that Monique had laid bare. This wasn't just about one phone call or one afternoon. It was about a mindset that had caused harm not just to Monique and Ethan, but to countless others in similar situations. Linda's face flushed as she stammered out another weak defense, but Monique cut her off gently. "If you really cared about Ethan," she said, "you would have come to me first. You would have trusted that love doesn't always look the way you expect it to." And with that, Monique turned and walked back to her home, leaving Linda to wrestle with the weight of her actions. The next morning, Monique heard a hesitant knock at her door. She opened it to find Linda standing there, her posture awkward and her face flushed with embarrassment. In her hands was a small plate of cookies, the universal peace offering. "I came to apologize," Linda began, her voice barely above a whisper. Monique crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe, waiting for her to continue. "I shouldn't have called the police. I see now that I made assumptions. Wrong ones. I'm sorry." The words were there, but they felt fragile, like they could shatter under the weight of the truth. Monique sighed, taking a moment to gather her thoughts before responding. "I appreciate you coming over," she said carefully, "but an apology doesn't erase what happened. Do you understand how dangerous your assumptions could have been? What if things had gone differently? What if the officers hadn't been as professional as they were?" Linda nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "I wasn't thinking," she admitted. I don't know why I did it, Monique didn't let her off the hook so easily. "You do know," she said gently but firmly. "You acted on a bias you might not even realize you have. And that's something you need to confront." Linda's tears spilled over as she nodded again, this time more resolutely. "You're right," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll do better. I have to do better." Monique softened slightly, but didn't let go of her stance entirely. She accepted the plate of cookies with a small nod, but left Linda with one final thought. It's not enough to say sorry. You have to change how you see people, how you see families like mine. As Linda walked back across the street, Monique closed the door and sat down with Ethan, who was happily munching on one of the cookies. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was a step forward, a small crack in the wall of misunderstanding that had divided them. As the evening settled in, Monique sat on the couch with Ethan nestled in her arms, his tiny fingers playing with her necklace. The events of the past 2 days lingered in her mind like a storm that had passed but left debris behind. She gazed at her son's innocent face, his laughter still untainted by the harsh realities of the world. But deep down, a knot of worry tightened in her chest. She knew the day would come when Ethan would notice how others looked at them, how their family didn't fit into the narrow mold society often clings to. And when that day came, how would she explain it to him? How would she shield him from the sting of judgment? Her thoughts drifted to Linda's apology earlier that day. It was a start, but it wasn't enough to erase the deeper issue at play. Bias wasn't just Linda's problem, it was a societal one, woven into the fabric of how people perceive one another. Monique thought about all the times she'd been judged unfairly, not just as a mother, but as a Black woman navigating a world that often saw her through a distorted lens. And now, she had Ethan to think about. How could she teach him to rise above those biases without letting them define him? How could she show him that love transcends skin color, assumptions, and prejudice? But even as these worries weighed on her, Monique felt a surge of determination. This was her family, and no one's ignorance could diminish the bond she shared with her son. She resolved to raise Ethan with an open heart and an unshakable sense of self-worth. The world might try to place labels on them, but they wouldn't let those labels stick. "We're stronger than this," she whispered softly, kissing Ethan's forehead as he drifted off to sleep. And as she sat there in the quiet glow of their living room, Monique realized that while bias might be a reality, they couldn't escape entirely. Love and resilience would always be their greatest defense. Life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way, doesn't it? One moment, you're basking in the simplicity of a peaceful afternoon, and the next, you're forced to confront the uncomfortable truths that society often sweeps under the rug. Monique's story is more than just an isolated incident. It's a mirror reflecting the biases that linger in our communities, often unnoticed until they erupt into moments like these. It's a reminder that assumptions are powerful. They can build bridges or burn them down. And yet, amidst the tension and pain, there's always room for growth, for change, for understanding. So, what about you? How often do you pause to question your own assumptions? How often do you choose curiosity over judgment, connection over division? Monique's strength in standing up for her family and Linda's eventual willingness to confront her biases show us that change is possible, but it starts with us. It starts with looking inward and asking the hard questions. What am I holding on to that might be hurting others? What can I do to see people as they truly are, not as I expect them to be? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary if we want to create a world where love and understanding triumph over fear and prejudice. If this story moved you or made you think differently about how we relate to one another, don't let it stop here. Let's keep this conversation going. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more stories like this, stories that challenge us, inspire us, and push us to be better. Because at the end of the day, we all have the power to make a difference, one choice, one action, one moment at a time.